While reproductive rights have become increasingly discussed in mainstream popular discourse, people have often limited the battle for reproductive agency to that of women's rights. However, in associating pregnancy and child-rearing to womanhood and femininity, the struggle for reproductive rights has left behind transmasculine individuals. In my research, I've decided to hone in on how and why transmasculine people have been excluded from reproduction, and consider what transformative potentialities transmasculine parenthood can bring to masculinity. So what does it mean to be transmasculine? Transmasculine can be defined as someone who is assigned female at birth but identifies with masculinity. I have decided to use the term transmasculine as compared to transman to emphasize how many transgender individuals may align themselves with masculinity, but may not necessarily define themselves within the gender binary. So how are transmasculine people excluded from pregnancy and parenthood? Many people don't realize that for a long time, in order to be legally recognized as a man, many states and countries would require transmasc individuals to undergo surgeries that would render them unable to reproduce. As laws shift and there are less restrictions on legally changing one's gender marker, and as society has begun to acknowledge transgender existence, we've created the conditions for more transmasculine people to be able to become pregnant. However, many struggle in receiving the care and support that they need in order to carry a healthy pregnancy. In the two articles I've cited in this slide, the authors state that the biggest challenges faced by pregnant transmascs today were their erasure and illegibility, meaning that society could not comprehend that a masculine person can be pregnant, and thus no systems were in place to support or acknowledge their existence while trying to access reproductive health care. Computer systems often could not process transmascs who were seeking reproductive services, which led to difficulties in insurance coverage. On top of that, many reproductive clinics have decorations and literature that are highly gendered, some even going as far as to only have women's restrooms. It is no surprise that many transmascs have cited being repeatedly misgendered at clinics by staff. In addition to having their identities disrespected and ignored, trans people also have to live with many medical uncertainties. There is very little research that exists on the reproductive health of transgender people, especially those who have undergone hormone replacement therapy or gender-affirming surgeries. Many doctors have received very little training in the health needs of trans individuals, leading to doctors spreading misinformation or outright rejecting their care. One participant in an interview cited waiting for over 10 years to begin medically transitioning because he'd always wanted to have children, but was unsure if starting hormone therapy would compromise his ability to do so. Many transgender masculine individuals have been told that testosterone use leads to sterilization, which is completely untrue but still spread by many medical professionals. This can lead transgender people to making unsafe and uninformed choices with their bodies. All of these challenges of discrimination and lack of information have led to transmasculine individuals not trusting and thus often avoiding medical professionals, which leads to health disparities. So what could be the potential benefits in normalizing transmasculine pregnancy? What might we accomplish in associating manhood and masculinity with child rearing? Alice Margaria discusses the cases of two trans fathers, each from a different country, who were marked as their children's mother on their birth certificates, despite both of them legally identifying as men. Both fathers went to court to be legally recognized as their children's fathers, but both lost. She describes the ways in which transmasculine fathers could transform our conceptions of what is defined as a father. Traditional definitions dictate that fatherhood is determined by who provides the sperm during a child's conception. She states that fatherhood is not typically seen as a direct relationship between father and child, but as a mediated tie that comes from the husband-wife relationship, as mothers are typically delegated to the actual work of child rearing. Transmasculine fathers have the potential to help define fatherhood as a direct relationship between father and child, one in which the father is accountable for his caretaking abilities. Our society has created the conditions in which men have difficulty in establishing healthy and emotionally fulfilling relationships, as emotionality and sensitivity is often discouraged and mocked as a feminine trait. Many men are greatly disconnected from their children and have difficulty bonding and nurturing them in emotional ways. To include men more within the role of parenting establishes that women are not responsible for being the emotional caretakers of all men and children. Men must also equally hold their weight as a parent and directly support and raise their children hands-on. Fatherhood is thus established as not a passive role that one holds merely for supplying sperm, but as an active role in which an emotional and empathetic bond is created with the child. So does this mean that transmasculine people are more likely to raise children into healthier ideas of masculinity and gender? The short answer to this is potentially. Cara Bergstrom-Lynch discusses her study of queer parents and how they raise their children to either do or undo gender. The study surveyed mostly gay and lesbian parents, with only 2 parents identifying as trans. However, both of them were trans women. Very few studies exist of trans parents in particular, even fewer focusing on trans masks, so findings of queer parents can be used and applied but with discretion. Bergstrom-Lynch found that queerness alone was not enough for parents to raise their children with gender transformative beliefs. She found that many queer parents, including the 2 trans mothers, feared how society would treat their children. This often led to parents raising their children within gender roles, as to not put them at risk of bullying or harassment, or even being taken away. Even parents who experienced gender non-normative behavior in their own childhood found themselves reinforcing gendered behavior in their children, often due to internalized homophobia and transphobia, as well as trying to prove to society that queer parents do not force their children to be queer as is commonly believed. So in short, there is not enough data to prove whether or not transmasculine individuals would necessarily raise gender-transformative children more so than other people. But as society changes and trans and queer identities become more accepted, parents as a whole, regardless of identity, may feel more comfortable in raising children outside of traditional gender roles. That is why the normalizing of transmasculine people having children is so important, as it goes to defy the biological determinism and heteronormative beliefs that gender roles are heavily based on. It can go to promote less rigidity in gender and begin to overcome the ways in which society upholds masculinity and devalues femininity. Thank you.